You can't ignore this sexual harassment stuff. And they're popping up. If it's true that Oliver Stone is the next one, or maybe it was that story about Melissa Gilbert, I don't know. It's still a terrible story. Beth Jones is a former HR executive turned business coach. And with this wave of sexual harassment allegations, it's now hitting Congress. And it's something everybody's going to have to be aware of. The times are changing. Good morning, Beth. Thanks for coming on.
Good morning.
So are we going to when I say the times are changing, is this are we looking at a change in the way things have always been, especially when it comes to dealing with women?
I certainly hope so. And I don't think it's about men or women. It's about power. So what we need to make sure that people are aware of is that there are consequences to inappropriate behavior. And that doesn't matter if you are a female or a male. If your behavior is inappropriate, if it's unwanted, it's sexual harassment.
Yeah.
So it's a matter of making people aware of what they can and can't do.
It is something about power, and I don't understand. I mean, we were just talking about the Oliver Stone story. I don't know if you saw the story about Melissa Gilbert, where this wasn't necessarily a sexual assault or even probably sexual harassment, but he became angry with her. And one day, years later, she was trying out for a part, and he gave her this script that was just completely demeaning and sexual and demeaning. She walked out of there crying. So it's power versus the actress who was powerless.
That's correct. And it happens not only in Hollywood, in movies, in that industry. It happens anytime that people who are attracted to someone else in their workplace are present. So it really does come down to what do you do in reaction to that feeling of attraction? How do you understand what is appropriate and what isn't?
When you were a HR executive, did you find it was difficult for a lot of women or men to come forward and report anything to you?
I did not in the workplaces that I worked in, but I am very aware of many women who felt as though they couldn't, or that if they did, there would be a negative repercussion to them. So what happens is you're in a situation where you're dependent on that person for your livelihood, for your income. Maybe you're dependent upon them to get that next promotion.
Right.
So in that situation, the balance of power is so out of whack that it makes people fearful. So they're afraid that if I do that, what's going to happen to me? And I think that has changed over the years. When I first started in business, frankly, if you reported sexual harassment, which I did at that point in time, you were the person who was likely to get fired as opposed to the person who was sexually harassing you. So it certainly has evolved and gotten better over the years.
I do have to say that I worked on certainly a different type of show years ago where we were, it's crazy. You had to draw the line between when you got off the air and when you were on the air, because I hate to say it, but we had a morning show this goes back 15, 18 years ago, that could have been, by today's standards, would be considered sexual harassment. The whole show was just sexual harassment, it seemed, if you were to look at it by today's standards. But it was very difficult, and I think difficult for some people, especially that I recall, drawing that line that when you got off the air, that's the program. Now you're in the hallway, you're working with coworkers, and we would have problems where people would find a difficulty in turning it off. How do you deal with that when the show kind of is it's more of a sexual type show? And you see that in morning radio across the country.
Well, what you do with that is you teach the people who are being victimized to say, stop it.
Yeah.
We're not on the air anymore. It's not funny. I don't like it. Don't do it. And you teach them how to report it and who to report it to when it happens. And then you teach those people who are taking that report, the managers in the organization, teach them what to do when that happens.
Yeah. I'm afraid, though, that that type of behavior, that type of program just doesn't fly anymore. It really doesn't. The stuff that was done, I think that some of the things that were done years ago, I just don't think it would fly. Are we at, I couldn't believe, and we started the show off this morning talking about the rules in Congress by which people are following For instance, if a young aide is sexually harassed, she has to report it to her supervisor. And then there's a 15-day cool down period. Then there's counseling. And then they want to bring you to a mediator where you're going to sign a non-disclosure. And oh, by the way, if there's a settlement, we, the taxpayers, are going to pay for it. How have we allowed for this to be policy in Washington?
And you have 180 days to do it.
And 180 days is, by the way, you only have 180 days to act. How have we allowed this to happen?
I absolutely had the exact same reaction. How in the world was that allowed, and who allowed it?
Right.
It is absolutely amazing to me. I had no idea that was the case. And in a situation in the businesses that I've worked in, it was so clearly different than that kind of situation. It was put in place to protect people and to make it condoned that kind of behavior was allowed.
I think the business world is far ahead of Washington. I mean, based on that alone. I mean, I heard one story yesterday of it. She was a young aide, came out of college, small town USA. She couldn't wait to get to Washington to do the important work, and she was excited about working with this congressman. He met her at the door with a towel on and then exposed himself to her. She left and never went back. I mean, that's just horrible.
It is. It's absolutely horrible, and it shows an arrogance and an ego that is absolutely amazing to me.
Yeah.
How it is, in the instance yesterday, we heard Charlie Rose, in response to the allegations against him, say that he thought that the feelings were reciprocal. And I find that is amazing, that someone is so egotistical that they think that their employees want them to walk around naked in front of them.
Yeah. And then I want to ask one final question, if we could. By the way, Beth Jones, former HR executive turned business coach. I know it's rare. It seems to be rare, but power. This is about power. So a powerful female boss imposing sexual harassment on a male. It does happen, but I think it's even more difficult for the male to report it because people would be like, oh, give me a break. She's a woman. Can you talk about that a little bit?
I absolutely can. I think it's coming. Those kinds of allegations are inevitable.
Yeah.
Because it is about power. It is not about gender. So women in positions of power can easily exert the same unwanted behavior on their subordinates, whether they're male or female.
And your opinion, we've seen, we've heard from some. We know that Al Franken. How have the floodgates opened? I don't think we're done. What are your thoughts?
No, we're far from done. And yes, the floodgates have opened, and thank goodness. It's about time.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Beth, for taking the time. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. Beth Jones through Fox News.